Today, I want to talk about change. Things around us are changing. Isn't it amazing how fast the trees bud out and the flowers bloom? It's just kind of like one day and then the next, bam, it's just all there. But I'm going to talk about change today in the light of an illustration of a rocket ship taking off from Earth to reach a destination beyond the atmosphere. A simple metaphor, but I want to relate that to the life of a church. Like looking at like a rocket ship. You know, we'd all love for our ministries to just blast off and go sky high. If you know anything about the Saturn V rocket, Saturn V, it's on the front of your bulletin. It was designed as the mainstay of space exploration for many years. It was designed also in stages. So that's what we're talking about today. Stages. Specifically stage 2. See, there is a payload on that ship which is relatively a small part compared to the rest of the rocket. But it is the important part. It's the part that is designed to arrive at its destination. Everything else is designed to get the payload there. In reality, most of the rocket simply serves to break the payload free from the bond of Earth's gravity and put it into orbit. Isn't that amazing how much of that rocket goes to support just that very small capsule there at top? See, the same concept plays itself out in the life of the church over time. See, all the struggles to raise up a church and develop its ministries and maintain order is simply to get the next generation so that they can build on the foundation of what we leave. That's why when Pastor Don Gifford installs a pastor at a church, he gives them a Bible, but he also gives them a baton. That baton is a symbol of, you know what, you're not the king. You're not the end. You are not the beginning. You're playing a part in a relay race of a life of the church. So everything you do is important for the people who follow after you. How many of you have raised kids? And you tried to get them to pick up after themselves. Why? Because somebody has to. And if they don't learn to pick up after themselves, you have to follow around picking up after them. Well, I live my ministry life with that understanding. There will be someone who follows after me. What will I give them? What kind of legacy, but also what kind of problems? When we got the chairs from Abundant Life in Indianapolis, there was a pastor there, and he was so generous to donate all of those chairs. We had some examples sitting on our stage. They're now at Banner. We're placing the pews up there, and they're now at the river. We received over 300 beautiful, beautiful chairs because they wanted to reach a younger generation. They wanted something more modern. But those chairs were more modern than what those churches had, so we rented a U-Haul, and we went and got them, and we put them into place down there because it's not the fact that they didn't have seats, it's just that it was better. It was better. And that's what we ought to always strive for. Maybe we can't reach excellence in ministry, but we can make things better. When I walk around Calvary, I always question myself, what I am doing, is it making things better or worse? So when we were over there picking up the chairs, there was a pastor there, before I forget my illustration. And I said, how long you been here? He said, long enough, if there's any problems, I created them. I'll never forget that. It was probably the best counseling session I ever had in pastoral ministry. That we're always wanting to blame the previous administration. Obama did this, Obama did that, Obama. And I get tired of hearing, what the previous people did. Well, what are you going to do about it? So I've been here long enough that if there's any problems at Calvary, I created them. And I fully accept that. But I also have to know that things will change over time. Don't you just wonder about the changes that have taken place in your lifetime? We were talking to Stevens, and we tried to give him the perspective that we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have internet. You know, when I grew up in Henryville, Henryville was my world. I didn't know anything outside of it. I'd heard of a city called Louisville that my dad went to work in, but it was a big, scary place that no one would ever go. He went there to slay dragons. See, we've got to understand that each of us, though, in our time, is like a stage of that rocket, of that Saturn rocket. Each of us has a season. Stephen Furtick calls it a window. There's a window of opportunity. He did a series called Work Your Window. You got to step into the opportunity while the window is open. You've got to set the stage for the time that you're going to be a part of that, because no one lasts forever. Because the whole purpose is to get things off the ground. So let's start there. See, on the launching pad, the largest and most powerful rocket, the first stage, is designed to do the heavy lifting. I'll give you an example before I go on, because you know I'm talking about the church. I go to these massive cathedrals, these large cathedrals with big towers and all of this stone and ivory and stained glass windows, and they got 30 people in it. Those 30 people didn't do the heavy lifting to get that cathedral built. See, someone went before them, left a legacy that they need to build on. Someone did the heavy lifting. See, it's the same way when the rocket takes off. It's just a lot of noise and a lot of shaking and a lot of thunder and a lot of bright light, but it doesn't seem like much is moving. And then you begin to see the liftoff, and you see that great force begins to break the inertia that is built into that rocket and begins to move things in the right direction. It makes the biggest impact, it makes the biggest noise, it has the largest display of power, and it only slowly begins to gain momentum. You think, how will it ever get to space if it's just moving about 3 or 4 miles an hour? But it has great lifting power. However, in serving its purpose of doing all that heavy lifting, its resources are quickly burned off. And what seems to be a massive powerhouse begins to slow its acceleration and ends its life cycle, having fulfilled its purpose. Now, it is at this moment in a rocket's flight and in a church's growth that things seem to fizzle out. There even comes a moment in time where that previous rocket stage becomes dead weight and a hindrance to the flight path of the rocket. Yet, according to its design, it slowly releases its control and separates from what we'll call the second stage. This is when things start to move again. If that is all there was to it, then all would be lost and the payload would never reach its final destination, right? When that first stage finally has nothing left to give. It is a burned out empty shell. It has done its thing. It has fulfilled its purpose. It now separates from the rest of the rocket ship, and if nothing happens, that would be the end. But through precise planning, see, there is a second stage that is about to kick in, designed to kick in at that moment. See, although it seems smaller, this second stage seems smaller, and it's not packed with as much fuel, it is not designed to break Earth's gravitational pull. And some of you are saying, Pastor, I thought church wasn't rocket science. Listen on. It gets deeper here in a minute. Although it seems smaller, it's not packed with much fuel, it was not designed. That second stage is not designed for liftoff. It is not designed to do the heavy lifting, but it is to set course and direction and to maintain a longer, sustained burn. However strong the first stage is, I don't know if you've ever noticed this on the flight path, However strong that first stage is, it cannot go straight up. Rockets don't go straight up. They immediately lift off and curve, a deep curve, because they cannot break the force of resistance going straight up. So they curve off the launching pad so they don't face Earth's pull directly. But the second stage, when they get to that point and the first stage breaks away, the second stage can, because there's less wind drag. There's less of the Earth's pull. It can maneuver more readily, and then it begins to turn and go out into space. You got to reach a great amount of speed to keep up with the Earth's rotation. This is the idea. You got to maintain a lot of change in your church to keep up with the pace of society. But the first stage is not designed for that. The second stage is. See, when this stage kicks in, that's when the first stage realizes. That's when the first stage realizes that if they didn't have that heavy lifting power, if they didn't bring them to this point, if they didn't provide the things that needed to get them to where they are now, the second stage could have no power to overcome what it was designed to do at its stage. See, we have to elevate that next generation to a higher level so that they can fulfill their function. See, the second stage is not a low-altitude device. That rocket can't get itself off the ground if the first stage was not under it. It is designed differently so that it can work at a higher altitude. Both stages cannot occupy the same environment, nor can they fulfill the same purpose. And I'll give you an illustration of that. As the resources of the first stage are used up, the second stage brings to the table a completely different combination of fuels that power that. I don't know if you realize that. But the fuel that burns in the first stage cannot be the fuel that burns in the second stage because the atmosphere is not the same. It's the same in the church. The things that motivated and empowered the first stage are very different from the things that will motivate and empower the second stage. And I know you heard those words, but I know many of you just can't get your head around that yet. See, in the Saturn rocket, the first stage is powered with a mixture of kerosene and liquid oxygen. Kerosene and liquid oxygen. The second stage is a combination of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, which will burn in space. See, two different atmospheres require two different fuels. Two different atmospheres in church require two different motivations behind those who go to that church. See, our nation is a completely different atmosphere than when we began in church. Would you concur with that? People don't think like we used to think. They don't act like we used to act. They don't do the things we used to do. We're living in a completely different atmosphere with first stage fuel, and it doesn't work anymore. See, it's not your mother's society. Things have changed, and the church must adjust to these new demands, or it cannot fly in this atmosphere. See, in the church, the establishers and builders are not motivated by what the expanders and maintainers are. The establishers and the builders are not motivated by the same things that our generation was motivated by. Now, neither is right and wrong. They simply serve a different purpose in a different season. And that's what we call transition. So, if you've got that in your heads, how do you know when one stage is complete and fulfilled its purpose and when the other stage needs to kick in? The answer is quite simple. When the resources of the first stage begin to burn out and the momentum begins to wane, it is time for the next stage to kick in and power the rocket or the church to its next season of flight, onward towards that destination. See, in a freer and leaner atmosphere, there is more time for development, which is setting the course and refining the ministry's purpose. See, in the past, people were motivated by commitment. Do you know what I mean? We could press people to make commitment. You need to commit to attendance. You need to commit to the tithe. You need to commit to prayer. You need to commit to Bible study. And everybody understood what that word meant, felt guilty by it, but nonetheless buckled down and did what they were committed to. I don't think you can find that in our society today. But there is a fuel that works. It's called relationship. You can't preach at people and say it's your duty and your job. You need to make a commitment for Christ. They come into a relationship with you. And through mentorship, coaching, basic friendship, they begin to see Christ in you. A process that the church wouldn't have put up with because it takes time in years past. We just wanted to get them saved. Get them filled with the Holy Ghost. Where are most of those people now? Because we didn't build relationship. So to get people motivated to your church, Pastor Holdeman calls it buy-in, to get them to buy into what you're doing, they have to develop relationship to fuel their commitment. Why? It's a different atmosphere. Now, if the second stage misfires, you can imagine you've gone through all that effort, expended all that fuel, got that thing going far and fast and high, and then you've burned out all your resources, separated, released control to the second stage, and if it does not fire, it does not maintain the flight. See, the first stage can look and go, oh, what a shame, but can do nothing. It is the total responsibility of that second stage to do what God called it to do and step up to the plate, to coin one of Sonny's phrases, step up to the plate and do the job that God has brought them here to do. See, the first stage has already expended all of its resources, but also fulfilled its purpose. See, this is why it is imperative that the previous generation is fully investing itself in a peaceful transfer of power to the next generation. You would not believe how the next generation wants control. The next generation is so rebellious, they won't listen. They won't do what you say. It kind of reminds you of you when you were young. See, the first stage can't do anything. This is as far as we can go. This is all we got. It is your job now. See, the first stage has expended all of its resources and fulfilled its purpose. See, always remembering in this transfer, in this transition, in this change, that the God who got a hold of you will get a hold of them. See, we cannot look at what we do through the eyes of the purpose we played in the life of the church. I watched a movie. I digress a little bit, but I watched a movie where this guy was making a clone of himself so that when he died, he would have himself as a younger man again. See, he was old, and he had a cloning machine and cloned himself, and he got on this machine and transferred all of his life experience and knowledge into the clone. So when the clone woke up, as far as the clone was concerned, he was him. I'm you. But see, the previous person couldn't see that it was him. No, he said, I'm still me. I'm still me. No, I'm you. You're no longer you. You're the previous me. That would be very hard to get. But you know what? There's only one, there's not two. But in that transition, they identify as the church, And we're saying, no, 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 no. We're the church. Well, if we're the church, we're not going to let them be the church. But there can be a transfer of all that we know and an identity into them. See, we cannot look at ourselves as being the life of the church 20 years down the road. But don't you want that church to have life? There has to come a time when you realize that the things that you do are not for you. We realize that in our families. There's everything in the world I would do for my sons. But you know what? I can't live through them. That's kind of weird, isn't it? You know, people, what do they call that when people try to live vicariously through another person? You know what happens when a person tries to live vicariously through another person? They become very controlling of that person. I want you to be me. I'm not you. Oh boy. I hope the Lord is allowing the anointing to get this through. See, we must trust that the rocket's designer, which was the Lord, has everything under his will, and he works it according to that will. Isn't that what the Bible teaches us? As the first stage completes its course, it must understand that all its hope, everything we've done, is invested in that second stage to deliver the payload into the hands of the third stage and finally on to the final destination. I won't be around to see it. Well, I do see it. That's what vision is about. That's what faith and hope are about. What I do because I see it. I won't be there to live it out. I won't be there to experience it. But they will bless me and you for having provided that foundation that got them to that level. When the third stage finally arrives in its destination, that's when things go into orbit, and that's a whole different parable there, but we want to stay with one thing. Even though we're experiencing this in our families, in our lives, in our jobs, in our church, our faith and our trust always have to be in the Lord. He brought us this far. The ones that came out of Egypt never saw the promised land, but their kids did. And they conquered that promised land. See, communicating our hopes to God through prayer is imperative. Oh, God, I don't know if you've ever fallen on your face for your kids because you thought they were never going to make it. Or if you're like me, falling on my face for the young people of our church, thinking, oh, God, what they need to know, what they need to do, the spiritual lives they need to possess to carry them. Well, you know what? They're not working in the same environment I worked in. God's going to teach them different things, new things. It's imperative that we pray and put our hope in God, but it is also a necessity that we communicate our trust in the next stage. We got to tell them we trust you. We believe in you. We got to communicate that through encouragement and personal investment. If you're not willing to pour into their lives, it's because you think they're not going to be anything. I poured money and cars and computers and cell phones and college degrees into my boys because you know what? They're going to be great men. I still believe that to this day. Because what is built in them is a moral fabric that the world cannot take away. And we need to do that with our church. We have to invest in the internal workings of that next stage. Not in controlling it, but in equipping it. See, we need to do the resourcing and equipping, but leave the guidance system in the command module. And that's the Lord. He is our guidance system. So, we need to consider the one meaning that I'm intending today by this parable. Are you the second stage or the first stage? Are you seeking to hand over your areas of ministry to the next generation? Well, yeah. Well, then you're the first stage. You're going to burn out. We're all going to burn out. We only have so much to give. Or, are you seeking to find your place of service and want more opportunity to guide the future of your church? Then you're the second stage. You're about to kick in. Now let me give you some statistics. If I haven't bored you enough with rocket science, listen to this. Over 80% of American churches are now in decline. This is according to the Malpers Group, M-A-L-P-H-U-R-S, Malpers Group. You know how many churches that is? In America, 400,000 churches are going down the tubes. George Barna says they won't be here in the next 10 years. See, I'm telling you that because that's what the world would say, but that's not what I believe for our church. I believe we're going to make this transition, that we're going to see that second stage kick in and go higher, farther, and faster than we ever thought we could. We thought it was great just to get to this level. Look at all that God has done in the generation that raised up this church out of an orchard, a field. And they've built, and they've built, and they've built, and they've invested. The final investment of that first stage is in the next generation. The Malpers Group maintains that 3 things need to happen in the American church for it to become fruitful again. Number 1, most churches, even those that are not in decline, need a revitalization program through pastoral counseling, coaching, and mentorship. You know, too many of our pastors are messed up. Too many of our pastors are having great difficulty maintaining their own lives. George Wood asked for a survey for all of the pastors, and then he asked for a survey from all the leadership, and then they went and checked in the financial backgrounds of all their ministries. You think they're digging deep? They are. They're digging into every area of your life, and they run background checks on every minister now, or everyone from the certified level to the ordained level is receiving background checks. And you know what they found out? Most of the Assembly of God ministers' finances are in disarray. They can't manage their own homes. Most of them do not have health care. Most of them have no retirement. Most of them are going to have to leave their ministry and get a job before retirement age comes. And George Wood thought, I didn't want to know this. But I gave our leadership the thing that he sent out in our... We get this all the time, but he sent out extras and said, give this to your leadership. It says, let's start a conversation on compensation. See, pastors don't work for money, but they have to be compensated enough to support their families. Most pastors are not. Most pastors are either bivocational or the wife works outside the home. All of these things are a strain on ministry. So a revitalization program has to go through pastoral counseling, coaching, and mentorship, teaching pastors how to stand by faith in the midst of whatever. Because I believe you can walk blessed. That doesn't matter about how much money you got in the bank. I'm a blessed man. There's not rarely any time I've had to go around and borrow $20 off of somebody, but I'm not saying that people don't give to us in a time of need. But that is the blessing of service, and a lot of ministers need to learn that. Their finances are in disarray. The district that I live in, Indiana district, repeatedly they have to add concessions. You don't want to hear this, Sonny. Concessions to pastors who are not paying their tithes to the district. Would you want that man pastoring? I'm sorry. Won't even pay your own tithes to the district, and you're pastoring the church, and you wonder why you're having problems. Pastors need help. Maybe some of them need to be dismissed.
That's why we should pray for all.
Yes.
Each and every one.
Each and every day. I appreciate this church, Paul, for the same reason. is that they always pray for Susan and I. They love us and take care of us. The second thing is, David Delp said this when he came to our leadership meeting years ago. During one of our district councils, he was gracious to have a leadership lunch with us here and talk about process. But he said this: some churches need to close. They need to die with dignity and invest their resources in revitalizing others or in new church plants. Still today, new church plants, if you remember the decade of harvest, new church plants is the most effective way to save souls. Plant a new church, plant a new church. You say, we got 400,000 closing, why do we need a new church? We need healthy churches. I mean, that's why our website has been named Healthy Church. Because you can't just keep pouring money, my dad said, pounding sand down a rat hole. I think that's the way he used to say it. You can't keep pounding sand down a rat hole. They're going to keep digging it out, digging it out. See, some churches need to close. Some churches bring shame to the gospel of Christ. Some churches have become satisfied and complacent to remain the same. Us four and no more. We're happy. We got a good thing going. Don't mess it up with converts. Then the third thing that needs to happen. Direct church planting still shows the greatest return on investment. I listened to two new guys that are younger than I now. Ron Carpenter, 22 years old, coming out of Bible college, started Redemption. 17,000 strong in 25 years. He's a tremendous man to listen to. We talked about this in the men's meeting, Steve. I don't listen to people who got problems. I listen to people who got answers. I listen to people who are successful. I listen to people who are doing it because anyone can find an excuse why you can't. Well, you don't understand my situation. I don't care about your situation, and you better learn what that means. God has called us to greater things, and if we walk in His ways, it says you will be blessed. You will have good success. You will stand in front of your enemies, and you will be a witness to me. But if you do your own thing, the Bible says you just bring reproach to the gospel of Christ. The second guy I listened to is Stephen Furtick with Elevation Church. I got hooked on him because we play some of Elevation's music here. It is worship. It is really, and to watch those videos and to see those young people in their atmosphere of worship and the tears and the praise, that's what got me started. So I started listening to him. He has about 6,000 in his church in 15 years. And it's his first church. Don't tell me there's something wrong with America. There's something wrong with the church. We cannot transition many of the older churches into the newer generation. And guys going out here in a church plant are having great success. But they also have to realize they're in their first stage. I want to see the second stage. Now, in other communities that are larger, where your children do not leave the community when they graduate, things can be easier and they can be different. But for many of you, even for us, your children have left to find work in other communities and they don't attend your church. So there's something that the Lord has probably 5 years ago laid upon my heart, we've talked about, is that we need to have spiritual sons and daughters. People that are staying in this community, are investing their lives here, and we need to be pouring everything we've got into them. I see some of them, I know some of them by name, talking to them, building relationship. Because you know what? They're here. Those are not. And if people are going to come here, it's because they live here, and it's because God has called us to those who are here. I call this next level leadership. I'll be done here in just a minute. Finally, the area that most improved existing churches. This is probably the hardest part of what I'm going to say. The area that most improved existing churches was when the pastoral teaching ministry of the church was invested in a person who was a leader. Did you get that? Today's pastors need to have leadership and administration skills like never before. It's a different season. Aunt Susie Bertha cannot manage the things of the church working as a part-time church secretary anymore.
You certainly can't count on the government.
No, I don't. Don't worry about that. You see, in our church, it's not a matter of committee. It's not a matter of people giving their best. It's a matter of someone who has invested leadership skill and can bring it through. This is what's bringing many of these churches and the ones that are being revitalized to the next level. It is when the people get behind a pastor who is a leader and is enabled to lead the church, and they start working to make his vision a reality. I can't say this from the pulpit, so I'm going to step over here. Some people, rather than to get behind what this pastor envisions, wants to go out and complain about it to others. And if that's the attitude, then I don't see how this church could really benefit from having those people. Not only that, if they're here, they infect you. And when they're there, they criticize this church to this community. They probably even called you on the phone and told you what was wrong with me. Well, let me stand up and I'll tell you what's wrong with me. I'm a leader. I got a vision. I'm going to work it with help or without, with money or without. If it takes a year, 10 years, I invest myself in the vision that God has placed on my heart. And that's to get this church into the hands of the next generation. How many times have you heard us say that? They're there. But Pastor, they're a mess. So were you. And the God that got a hold of me has promised that if we will give them a place in our congregation of influence, that's the term that the Assemblies is using today, a place of influence. Do you know there are now pastors asking for the resignation of George Wood, our superintendent, because he's reaching out to a younger generation? We don't want change. That's what they're saying at a funeral. Anaheim, California is not going to be easy. The man's in his 70s. But pray that he allows the voice. It really impacted me when Richard Crisco sent me 10 reasons why millennials don't want to be in your church. I just want to quote one of them. Don't remember which number it was. He says, I want to love my church. I want to say good things about my church. I want to be proud of my church. But I cannot. That's from a millennial. They want to be here. But they want to have a voice. We got to quit shutting them up. We got to listen sometimes to what is a prophetic voice coming from a source that we don't want to hear. Remember Balaam's donkey. What some churches experience is either passive-aggressive behavior against the pastor who leads, or they simply provide passive resistance by turning their attention elsewhere. Well, I got my job, and I got my kids, and I got this, and I got that, and Pastor, just be thankful I show up. Now, if you were serving me, I'd be thankful. But you're serving God. And like the lady who called me on the phone, she says, what does it mean to have no gods before me? She got a revelation that day as we talked. Don't set up idols in your heart, as Ezekiel says. Neglecting your ministry is far much worse than just avoiding a commitment to ministry. Nothing's going to get the goat of this pastor more than someone who says, I want to do this, and is not faithful in it and doesn't do it with all their heart. Isn't that what Proverbs says? Whatsoever thy hand finds to do, do it with all thy might. See, too often leadership in ministry is people wanting to do what they want to do instead of what leadership dictates. And I literally, and I use literally, I literally have people say, well, if I do this, can I do it my way? I'll give you an answer for that. No. We have policies and procedures. We have things that guide the affairs of this church so that won't happen. And that's why you can trust what we do here at Calvary. We don't give in to the whims. And that was so encouraging what you said, Sadie. You might not know that these words that come out are confirmations of what God is saying to me, that you said something to the effect that I thank God for a pastor who doesn't give to the whims of other people. I'm too busy listening to this voice to really care too much about what the voices around me are saying. And if you are a church, you would be praying, Lord, let him hear your voice. Amen. Lord, let him hear your voice. And let me know that it is your voice when he speaks. Passive-aggressive behavior also tends to show up in resentment towards new people and towards people who are given an opportunity. We try people. We hope they succeed. But you know what some people have? They have what I call the hope you fail syndrome. I discovered this syndrome in southern Indiana because pastors hoped that I didn't make it. And I would say other pastors in the assemblies hoped that I didn't make it because there wasn't enough people to go around. And they were afraid that some people would leave their church, because that's the habit of so many Christians, and go over to our church because there was a new pastor there, until they found something wrong with him, and then they would go to another church and go to another church and go to another church. But they developed a hope you fail attitude. Well, that guy's got a pride problem, so you know what? I hope he fails. That'll teach him a lesson. No, it just destroys the church. We have to have David's heart when he found out that Saul and Jonathan had fallen in battle. He said, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Because it never brings glory to the church for us to allow any of our people in leadership to fall away. Because it is fuel for the enemy. Whenever someone falls in pastoral ministry, it reflects on all pastors. Pray for your pastor. No matter how big or how hard the church, how big or how small the church, the same weight is placed on him as a pastor. This demonic spirit I call the hope you fail syndrome. I've experienced it personally. I've experienced it from people that I've instructed in ministry. And it's a demonic spirit that's taken out more than one church and many pastors. Let me tell you this, transition is inevitable. The previous generation must fully invest itself in the next. Find something you can do to pour into some young person's life. The next generation then must take firm hold of their responsibilities in the church and prove themselves worthy. What you're not going to find is someone who is going to make a commitment as we understand commitment. They'll come into relationship with us, and as long as the relationship is maintained, you will have them serving with you and alongside you. Lose the relationship, you lose the leadership. 1 Timothy 3:10 says, let them first be proved, and then let them serve. The whole context of that passage is on the word serve. See, there are those who are too smart and see they have no place in a church where your service is based on humility. So, again, I call you as the believers of God that God has put together here in a place we call Calvary to seek God as to what He wants you to do here at Calvary. See, for the first stage, that's most of us, what investment are you making in the new ones in our church? You know, for a pastor to hear when I call someone or send them a letter, someone from your church stopped by. You know, most successful churches, if a new person comes to church that morning, there is a person from the church stopping by their house that afternoon. I am amazed at the things that successful and growing churches are doing that we got a long ways to even comprehend. What investment are we making in new people? What kind of encouragement, what kind of inspiration, what kind of opportunities are we raising up for them? I was just talking with Tom about an opportunity, right? Tom's going to get more involved, you know. We love Tom and just thank God that he thinks enough of us to be here and comes on Wednesday night. And I hope that he's getting as much out of it as we are with his fellowship. He's a tithe payer too. Well, thank you. You just got about 10 feet tall in my view. See, that's what we want. But you know what? I can't speak for him, but I'm going to anyway. What he wants is relationship. He wants people he can trust and people he knows and people who will speak into his life and people who will receive what he has to say. Man knows the word an awful lot. The second stage, for you that are at the second stage, how are you developing yourself for ministry in the future? I see some people wanting an opportunity, but they won't prepare. At Calvary, we not only help you prepare, we pay for it. And that's cost us in quite a few areas, but you know what? I'm committed to it. We have a school that prepares you for ministry that, gosh, anyone who was serious could afford. But if you want to come in here and say, I already know all I need to know, well, then do it someplace else. We're all learning and growing. For the second stage, are you developing yourself? And how do you intend to prove yourself? And Sonny already took it away from me. First area you want to prove yourself at Calvary is whether you'll tithe or not. Then I'll know that you are committed to this church. So this is a hard-hitting message to tell you that what you see before you is the resources and wherewithal of one generation giving it all it's got to get you up there. Give you the chance. And as that resource begins to burn out, we're going to have to see that next stage kick in. So over the next few years, we have to find everything we can find in our hearts to invest ourselves in that generation. We talked with Terry Sawinski. We've tried several things. We've tried videos. We've tried concerts. And I'm going to continue trying things to penetrate the school. So when I was talking with Nick Philipposian and Craig Dusick, we really want an avenue into the school. And I said, well, how much do you want it? Would you be willing to try something? Well, yeah, what is it? let's just go tell Terry Sawinski that we're here to serve. We'll do whatever you want us to do. We'll start showing up on Wednesday morning to the FCA meeting, and we'll listen and we'll learn. And those other two pastors are on board with that. Because apparently I don't know what I'm doing because I can't do it. But she knows what she's doing. And you know what? If we can't have the ministry, maybe we can help her. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to touch some young person's life in our school. See, I'm always trying, always seeking, always praying. There has got to be a way to reach that next generation. And that's the kind of heart I want every one of us to have. Pray, God, you know, that young guy that mows my yard, this person over here at the gas station, the young person that I work beside. What can I do to just pour into their life and encourage them and strengthen them in the things of God until we develop a relationship that we're not all about ourselves. We're all about the next generation in this community. One pastor said, and I forgot his name where I read this, but he said, God is always about the next generation. That's why you're saved. Good stuff. So on that note, just seek your hearts as we pray today that God give us new revelation of what we're about and what we're investing in and why we have labored so hard to bring this church to this point in this day when I don't even recognize the atmosphere that is around me. Father God, I pray that this parable plays itself out in many other ways in our hearts and minds. May you lock it to the Scriptures, Father. I've only used one verse today, but lock it to illustration after illustration of how they went everywhere and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, confirming the word with signs following. That's what we're about. The everywhere God of our community. Show us places we haven't considered, ministries we haven't tried. Anything in these critical hours to get that second stage to ignite and begin to burn bright and go farther and faster than we've ever dreamed. But Father, as we have served in our day, may they serve as well in their day. And as you have forgiven our mistakes and misguided ideas, you will forgive theirs. Yes. But we will continue to pray for them, encourage them, yes, and invest in them. In Jesus' name, yes. Amen.